Hi, I'm Emily Carver. Now, in a recent car crash interview, the Deputy Prime Minister and Housing Minister, Angela Rayner, made glaring contradictions in her party's housing and immigration policies. Now, it would appear Labour's approach to these rather important issues is not just misguided, it's downright dangerous for Britain's future. The housing crisis that isn't, or is it? Well, Rayner began by highlighting a housing crisis only to perform an astonishing U-turn just moments later, claiming suddenly there is plenty of housing already. OK, so there's a bewildering contradiction here, and it's left even the seasoned interviewer, Sir Trevor Phillips, visibly taken aback. It's as if Labour can't decide whether we're in a housing crisis or swimming in surplus properties. So let's consider the numbers for a moment. OK, so Labour plans to build 1.5 million new homes over the course of this Parliament. Fine. A rather ambitious target that no one in the industry believes they can achieve, but it's good to aim high, I guess. It was then pointed out that we're expecting an influx of 2.5 million immigrants in the same period of time. So, considering this, Rayner was asked how many of the 1.5 million new homes would be filled by the 2.5 million newcomers that we're expecting. Now, this is where Angela appeared to contradict herself. On the one hand, she said there is plenty of housing already, but on the other, she said there's not enough for the people that desperately need it. OK, so which one is it? She made both of these claims in the very same sentence. Have we got plenty of housing, or do we not have enough for those who desperately need it? Now, we spoke to Russell Quirk, property expert on the show, who can't make sense of it either, really.
I'd love to help make sense of what Angela Rayner says. I don't think anybody could do that, Emily, frankly, because she makes no sense, does she? She was like a rabbit caught in the proverbial headlights yesterday with Trevor Phillips, and talk about someone that is not across her brief. And indeed, I'd argue this is where ideology and reality are starting to collide for this government now, on the basis that yes, they want open door immigration, even though they say they don't. Yes, they say they want to build lots and lots of homes. But actually, when you start to equate the number of homes they say they're going to build, which they won't, by the way, and I'll come back to that in a second, and the fact that the growing population of Britain, thanks almost entirely to net migration, will actually consume all those homes. When that reality is kind of faced by Trevor Phillips, in this particular instance, grilling Angela Rayner on a very, very kind of basic Diane Abbott kind of mathematics basis, really, we see that the whole approach of this Labour government, particularly on housing, crumbles before our very eyes. I mean, how Angela Rayner can say, well, actually, even though we've pledged to build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years, we don't really need to because there's loads of housing. I can tell you there is not loads of housing, particularly affordable homes, particularly social housing. Governments over the last 10, 15, 20 years have failed miserably to build not just adequate housing stock, but in particular, housing that is needed at the lower end of the scale, particularly social rent.
Well, Russell, going through that interview, there was also a particularly interesting line beyond this mathematical issue on migration and housing, where Angela Rayner did say that we need to prioritise people's needs over those of newts and bats, etc., and that the planning reform in this country is all too often prioritising wildlife over people living in the United Kingdom. That surely is a great opportunity for Labour to push forward some reform for building new housing.
Well, yes, you would imagine that there would be some common sense priorities applied there. And it's definitely true, it's definitely right that when it comes to ecological reports that are put in place before a planning application can be progressed, before it actually gets consented, yes, you do have to worry about all sorts of things, bats, newts and badgers in particular. Even though we spend time culling badgers in Britain, they're also a protected species when it comes to building housing developments, which seems rather kind of cockeyed to me. But the problem is that this government has almost been in power for 6 months. It promised that by the end of 6 months, the end of October, which would only be 3 or 4 months into its tenure, that it would have rewritten and distributed what they call the National Planning Policy Framework, which is effectively the textbook, the Bible, for kind of deciding on planning applications in Britain. That has still not been produced. It's still not landed, and we're nearly at Christmas.
So there you go. Which one is it? Do we have plenty of housing, or do we not have enough? What do you make of it? Now, even a primary school student could spot the glaring mismatch there. So the immigration elephant in the room is pretty clear. in my view, that Angela felt deeply uncomfortable addressing that big fat elephant in the room, the elephant being immigration. As the interviewer pointed out, how can a minister go from saying there is a housing crisis in one breath to suddenly there's absolutely loads of housing when immigration is mentioned? What's clear is that Labour has absolutely no idea what they're doing when it comes to immigration policy. It does look like net migration is set to remain sky high, but the public aren't going to accept it. Net migration is currently hovering around 900,000 per year. That's the size of Leeds, net, being added to the population. So people are asking, when does it all end? This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, is it? It's about the very fabric of our society and, of course, the strain on our public services and, I guess, housing too. So what's the solution? Well, Labour's solution is clearly to build more houses and hope that somehow the numbers will fall, despite there being absolutely no target or absolutely no limit. Oh, and certainly don't include it in your 6 milestones, despite it being the #1 issue for a huge proportion of Brits. Keir Starmer just forgot that one, didn't he? The public's verdict. So the public reaction to Rayner's performance was, as you can imagine, swift and merciless. Social media erupted with criticism. One user aptly described her comments as innumerate, incompetent, inept. I would say it reminded me of a Diane Abbott interview of old. Another likened the interview to a scene from the thick of it, except this isn't political satire. It's the government of the United Kingdom we're talking about. So Labour's polling woes. It's no wonder, then, really, that Labour's polling numbers are taking such a hit. When pressed about Nigel Farage's Reform UK overtaking Labour in a recent poll, Rayner claimed people were impatient for change. Already? But perhaps the truth is simpler. People are seeing through Labour's smoke and mirrors act and ignoring immigration as an issue that concerns the majority of people in this country certainly is no way to gain popularity. So the real cost of uncontrolled immigration. While Labour boasts about sending 9,000 illegal immigrants back outside of the country, they conveniently ignore the hundreds of thousands pouring in through legal channels. This isn't just about housing. It's about the immense pressure on our NHS. It's about our schools. It's about our social services. It's about our communities. Let's be clear. This isn't about xenophobia or closing our borders entirely. I don't believe anyone wants that. It's about having a sensible, controlled immigration policy that aligns with our nation's needs and capabilities. And very importantly, integration. Now, Labour's current approach is akin to leaving the front door wide open and then wondering why the house is overcrowded. Well, the environmental impact. So, in the rush to build more homes, Labour does seem to have forgotten about some of the environmental costs. Our countryside is not an infinite resource. Every green field paved over for housing is a piece of Britain's natural heritage, lost forever. Is this really the legacy we want to leave for future generations? And a call for transparency. As one social media user rightly demanded, can we have the numbers, please? Hard facts and transparency. The British public deserves more than vague promises and contradictory statements. We need a clear, honest assessment of our housing needs, our immigration levels, and how these two crucial factors intersect. We cannot continue to ignore that there is a link between housing, the housing crisis, and sky-high levels of immigration, however much Angela Rayner might like to ignore that crucial link. So, a crossroads for Britain. Britain stands at a crossroads. On one path, we have Labour's approach, uncontrolled immigration, endless house building, and the gradual erosion of our countryside and our public services. On the other, we have an opportunity for a measured, sustainable approach that balances our economic needs with our social and also those environmental responsibilities. The choice is clear. We simply cannot continue down the path of uncontrolled immigration, net migration of 900,000 plus per year. It's absolutely crazy. We can't just hope that somehow, magically, it would all work out. We've been badly let down by our politicians, successive governments. It's time now for a desperately needed, serious, adult conversation about Britain's future, one that goes beyond sound bites and actually addresses the complex realities we now face as a country. So as we look towards the next election, and it's not too far off in the distant future, voters must ask themselves, can we really trust a party that can't even keep its story straight when it comes to housing and immigration? Britain deserves better. We deserve leaders who can offer more than contradictions and confusion. We deserve a future that doesn't sacrifice our public services resources, doesn't sacrifice our communities and our very way of life on the altar of unchecked immigration and unsustainable development. It's time to wake up, Britain. The immigration shambles must end, and it must end now.